Welcome once again to the Retirement Blueprint with Tim Lofton. I'm your host, Spike Spengel. Every single week, Tim addresses retirement planning solutions for you, Ohio. He educates me on the way you work at Axum Planning and Wealth. So I always appreciate that. Tim, how are you doing? Sharp looking suit, but how you doing? How you doing inside here?
Thanks. I'm doing well. It's we're ready to get 2023 started and 2022 behind us, and
keep this new year rolling along. Hope for some positive things. Some of the things we're going to be talking about today is we often talk about retirement planning for you and your spouse. And something that the viewers were bringing up for us is it just as important to do retirement planning if we're single? And what do we do if we're possibly moving on to a second marriage? So we want to address some concepts outside the box of regular retirement planning. And so we thank you, Ohio, for bringing that to our attention. Tim, let me ask you about that. Is it just as important for someone who is single going into retirement to have a retirement strategy?
Well, Spike, I think it's even more important. When you think about, especially with, let's think about just estate planning. There's a kind of a get out of jail free card when you have a spouse, because everything avoids probate and can go direct to a spouse. If you don't have a spouse, you have elected your officials that are sitting in the state of Ohio and Columbus to make your estate planning decisions for you.
You mean just the laws in place are what will determine where your money goes?
And so, you don't have that get out of jail free card. And then when you think about retirement planning as someone who is single or maybe widowed, is that, you're dependent on typically one pension, one Social Security, your personal savings. There isn't the fallback to, potentially have somebody else to pick up that slack. And so when you're thinking through your retirement goals, you have to be spot on when it comes to...
because you're solo, which means you're solo on your Social Security. You are solo on the amount that you have saved. You are solo in trying to figure out your health care. And in fact, I think for me, that's one of the biggest reasons, especially if you're going into retirement on your own. Let's talk about long-term care. Now, maybe we did have children. Maybe your spouse passed away. Maybe you've gone through divorce, which we'll also address in a little bit. But those long-term care needs, we won't necessarily have somebody else around, and we obviously want to be able to retire with choice and with dignity, right?
Correct.
So if someone is going to retirement by themselves, do you start talking a lot harder about long-term care needs?
Well, I think it's a bigger issue. I don't know if it's a bigger issue. It's a different issue. There's certainly complications with a couple. I mean, what if one person goes into a nursing home and one doesn't? And how can you afford to have two different home bases, and is there the cash flow to pay for it? But as a single person, you have to look at, the importance of what you've spent your whole life saving. We've worked, we've saved, we've done without, we've gotten to the finish line, and do we want all of that to just evaporate in a 2 or 3 year nursing home stay?
Right. So putting together even all of those legal documents you've talked about before in estate planning, your medical directives, your legal and financial directives, who do you want to be in charge of that? Maybe even more important if you're single.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely the case. I think that a lot of times, when you're single, sometimes the thought process is, well, I don't have anybody else to take care of. And, that's not really true. I mean, if you have kids, if you have family, if you have, maybe even a charity or something that you're wanting to leave money to, there's so many things that you can do better with those dollars than put them at risk potentially for, just going away from paying for a nursing home.
Right. Now, some of the reasons we might be single going into retirement could be choices outside of our own control, whether it's going through a divorce or our partner passing away. But then it gets even more complicated when we might have the joy of a second marriage later in life. And now we've got even more planning needs, and we've got to take a look at those beneficiaries. It can get kind of complicated over at Axum Planning and Wealth, doesn't it?
I will say that second marriages are absolutely one of the most complicated estate planning things that we do. Listen, I love love, right? I'm a big fan of love. And our divorce rate in this country, unfortunately, is creeping up to 60% plus. And that's not the only scenario, though, right? A lot of times, a client is widowed and they find someone else, right? Which is great, which is, that's what makes the world go round, is having somebody to live life with and enjoy life with. And so I love that. But a lot of times that new love clouds some of our thought processes, or it just doesn't occur to people to have those conversations because they're thinking, well, we're at an age where we're not going to have kids anymore. We already have our kids, and so there's less that we have to do in estate planning, when actually the case is you have more to do.
One of the things, I'm not sure if this is reversible or not, or if you can change, but Social Security. Now, I know we're not necessarily checking the financial statements of our new love, but hopefully that conversation comes up at some point. But Social Security can be important when you're choosing. Can you change the decision? Can you change your Social Security? So if you're on the spousal benefit, are you able to move from one to another, or once you turn on your Social Security, does it stay with whichever spouse you started with?
Well, I will tell you, it's complicated.
Okay.
When you're looking at Social Security benefits, one of the things that I will say the Social Security office does well is if you go down there and meet with them and kind of talk through your situation, you can really get a lot of information from them. And we really rely on some of that information as we're helping people to work through that planning process.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the retirement blueprint. If folks are getting ready for retirement, getting ready for that second marriage, or maybe if they're going into retirement on their own, is the retirement blueprint, is it going to be able to cover everyone? I mean, you've got so many different people who come into the office. I don't believe the retirement blueprint is a one-size-fits-all. How do you tailor it for people's specific situations?
Well, I think you covered the key words. It's not a one-size-fits-all in the plan. It's a one-size-fits-all in a process. And so our process is designed to basically be able to sit down with anybody in retirement or someone approaching retirement and look at all those key factors, things like tax planning, wealth management, income planning, long-term care, and estate planning, like what we're talking about today. If you're in a scenario where you're thinking about maybe a second marriage, or you're already freshly in a second marriage and you're like, I don't know how we're supposed to do what we're supposed to do, the retirement blueprint is a solution for you.
All right. Thank you, Tim. We're going to take a very short break. When we get back, we're going to talk about ways that you can protect your assets into retirement. For the viewers out there, though, of Tim's show, we are offering a complimentary retirement blueprint. But Tim doesn't know if you need help with your retirement planning strategies unless you reach out to us. Call 855-684-3485, or you can use the QR code down on the bottom of the screen. So open up your phone, go to the camera function, and you've seen it at those restaurants. How many times have you pulled up a menu? You can do the same thing with the QR code on the screen. Open your phone to the camera, point it at the QR code, and then click on it. It'll take you right to Tim's website. Or if you want to, just call the phone number right here, 855-684-3485. Call and ask for your own complimentary retirement blueprint. More with Tim Lofton right after this.
We're passionate about making sure our clients live stress-free in retirement. We do that with the Retirement Blueprint. It's our trademark planning process designed to help you navigate to and through retirement. When you're nearing retirement, it's essential that you have a written plan and know exactly how that plan will work for you. Let us show you how 27 years of experience can make a difference in your plan.
Welcome back to the Retirement Blueprint with Tim Lofton. We're talking about protecting assets in retirement. Most specifically, as we're going into maybe even a second marriage, do you have any client experience inside Axiom Planning and Wealth? Maybe you could share with some of the viewers either ways that you were helped to protect for somebody in a second marriage or mistakes to avoid?
Sure, and I see a lot of common stories, and I could mention multiple clients in the second marriage arena. one of the things, and this just came up a couple of weeks ago with some clients that came in, where they were a second marriage, they were both widows. They came into the marriage each independent of each other. They had been living on their own for quite a few years, and so neither of them they weren't sharing their income with each other. They were basically doing what they wanted to do. They did buy a house together, but they paid cash. They each put in 50-50, and so, and we see that scenario quite a bit. The issue that I brought to their attention that they really hadn't thought through was long-term care, because the husband actually had a long-term care policy that he had bought years ago, and the wife did not. And so the problem is that when you get married, you marry into other people's problems as well, right? And so in the event that she were to go into a nursing home, part of that burden, some way, somehow, could come back on him. The other problem that we saw was that they have, and this isn't with this particular client, but in a lot of cases where they're not independent, where there is a sharing of income, when one spouse passes away, how do we handle that with the kids? And so husband has 2 kids, wife has 2 kids from previous marriages. The idea is that if either one of them pass away, their assets will pass to the kids. But what if you can't afford to do that at the time they pass away? That's very common today, where the assets have to kind of stay in place in the event that something happens to one of the spouses.
So I get what you're saying. So we've got our 2 spouses. They had other kids. We want to make sure that our spouse is taken care of. They might be thinking, well, Dad passed away. Shouldn't I get his estate? But what about, you got to have those conversations of, are we taking care of each other as spouses first, or when the other one passes away, are we leaving it to the kids? Because it sounds like you're saying, maybe the remaining spouse might not be able to stay in the home or live the lifestyle, because they could live another 5, 10, 15 years.
Exactly, and more importantly, it has to be in writing. And this is where the estate plan really takes form, because you want to take care of each other, but you also want to ensure that those dollars pass on to the kids the way that they're supposed to pass on. And so a lot of times we're using a trust that will be funded at the death of the one spouse. They can provide income to their surviving spouse, but that trust protects those dollars that when the other spouse passes away, it's definitely going to pass on. You also have the ability, one of the things, remember that these 2 widows just got remarried. One of them passes away, there's a chance they may get remarried again, right? And we want to make sure that the dollars that were put away for her care and well-being.
You're a true believer in love, aren't you, Tim?
I love love. I do love Spike. And just as a side note, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but one of the fastest growing retired marriage that are happening in nursing homes.
Okay.
So I mean, love is still in the air. You never get too old for love. But back on subject.
Tinder retirement community.
Tinder retirement community. It's a new opportunity that I think we should start a website.
We need a venture capitalist out here. Tim and I have a great idea for retirement.
Great idea. Nursing home Tinder. It's
goodness.
It's going to be huge.
But this really can get complicated. So not only important, it sounds like, for the newlywed couple in their maybe 50s or 60s, but for them to have conversations with their kids, so they know, because
with each other.
The legalese of this stuff can really get to be complicated. When the kids assumed one thing and the spouses assumed another, the new spouse is in one house. So I do not believe, though, you are an attorney. How do you help quarterback all of this?
Well, I have read a lot of John Grisham. I'm actually finishing a John Grisham book as we speak.
Big Aaron Sorkin fan, right?
So. No, we have an estate planning attorney. That's all she does is estate planning, and that's a key takeaway here for the folks at home. Is you want to use an attorney that specializes in estate planning, not just a general practitioner attorney that says they can do your estate plan, but someone that is their sole practice. And by utilizing an estate planning attorney, that gets the structure and puts things in writing. But you brought up a great point, Spike, and that is that conversations need to have spouse to spouse. And those conversations a lot of times don't happen before the marriage. You're in love, right? I mean, you think back to when you got married, I mean, there's things that you didn't talk about, you didn't even think to talk about. These are things that are super important as you're entering into, or if you're newly into a second marriage, is understanding who gets what and when, and what are the needs. And coming into our office and sitting down and kind of laying that story out there so that we can help shape an estate plan that's going to make those things actually happen.
Tim, there's another thing that I want to bring up real quick before we go out to break, and that having conversations about finances, whether it's between our spouse or whether it's between our kids, it's kind of a new concept. A lot of people, especially of a certain age, talk about their finances or keep their talk about very close to the vest. They think it's either impolite or uncomfortable. As the financial advisor, though, you encourage to have these conversations. Are these conversations you're willing to facilitate in the office?
Yes, absolutely. And for those folks at home, you were raised by World War II parents or Depression-era parents, and they drilled into your head, do not talk about finances, do not talk about money, especially to your kids. It's a horrible idea. Please listen to me when I tell you that it is a great idea for you to have those conversations. Your kids are not going to try and steal your money. They care about you, they love you, they want to help take care of you. And I've had this conversation so many times where mom and dad end up in a disaster because nobody knew. You know, I would say 1 out of 4 times the kids actually know how much money mom and dad have when we're talking about inheritances and planning. 3 out of 4 times they have no idea. They have literally no idea. Does mom and dad have nursing home insurance? Don't know. Do they have life insurance? Don't know. How much money do they have saved? I don't know. And there is nothing wrong with having a multi-generational conversation. We facilitate those in the office every day.
Right, right. So folks, if you are looking to get a retirement planning situation, not just for your family, not just between you and your spouse, but a conversation between you and your kids, your heirs, give Tim a call. It's literally what they do in their offices every day, helping families of Ohio right here get started on their own retirement blueprint. If you'd like to get your own complimentary retirement blueprint from Tim Lofton, all you've got to do is call the phone number right here, 855-684-3485. I want to get into another case study about how we protect our assets in retirement when we get back with Tim right after this break.
Retirement is about choosing where you want to go and mapping out a plan to get there. That's why I created the Retirement Blueprint. Of course, things don't always go according to plan. Come learn how our team can help you avoid potential hazards and find alternate routes. We're here to do life with you and share your journey. Let us blueprint your life to keep you on track to make sure you get the most out of retirement. Are you on the road to success? Call us today for a complimentary review to find out. Let us plan your tomorrow today.
Welcome back to the Retirement Blueprint with Tim Lofton of Axum Planning and Wealth. He's a financial advisor who helps folks like yourself right here in Ohio with your retirement planning strategies every single day in the offices. Tim, when folks come in, often the adage goes, people don't know what they don't know. And you've got somebody who comes in, they think maybe they're planning for themselves, but you're surprised even sometimes what you uncover. How about a client case study? Who's somebody you talked to recently?
Well, we had some actual friends of ours that came in to kind of just do a checkup. They're getting close to retirement, but they just wanted to kind of see if they were on track. And you know, we have a process that we take everyone through with the Retirement Blueprint. And as we started asking questions, we found out more information about their mom and dad. And, you know, was kind of questioning, we were talking about inheritance and, you know, what mom and dad were doing, and discovered that, well, mom and dad was actually in a nursing home already. And of course, they were told that because mom and dad's in a nursing home, there's literally nothing they could do from a planning standpoint. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And they said, well, you know, because they're already in there, they're just going to have to pay out of pocket until all the money's gone. And,
Wow.
as I was looking at their assets and some of the other scenarios with their income and pension, I said, well, that's absolutely not true. In fact, they can protect a significant amount of their income. And so in their case, we were basically able to do a calculation of this is about what 5 years of coverage is going to cost. Our estate planning attorney then came in, created an irrevocable trust, and took all the rest of their money and their house, and basically were able to protect it in that irrevocable trust so that after that 5 years, all of that money will essentially be protected from a nursing home. What was interesting is that they had no idea, and they had just taken, advice from somebody who wasn't even an attorney. It was just a general kind of off-the-cuff statement, and I don't know if it was somebody at the nursing home. Obviously, it's in their best
or
interest.
water cooler advice, or maybe
Right.
just what they thought on their own. They're like, look, mom and dad, they're already in long-term care, so we're just going to have to spend down the assets. But they didn't know what they didn't know.
They didn't know what they didn't know. And in their case, it worked out really well because, as we've talked about in previous shows, you can't move an IRA or a retirement plan into an irrevocable trust. You would have to take it all out, pay taxes on it, right?
Okay.
And
Well,
they're-
you looked at me like, right. I'm like, sure.
Yeah. Just,
I don't.
yes.
No, wait, now, small detail, but it sounds important. So I can't just place an IRA into a trust.
Correct.
Because I haven't paid tax on
Well,
it?
in an irrevocable trust.
Okay.
Okay.
Because
so
that's being left to somebody else. So
Right.
somebody's got to pay the taxes on
you
it.
have to give it away to the trust, and by giving it away, it has to come out of an individual
Okay.
retirement account, or it would still be yours, right? And that's
Okay.
the design of it. So in this case, we basically used the IRA to fund the long-term care expense, which they were going to take that money out and pay taxes on it anyway. All the money that was already outside of being taxed, we were able to move outside of the estate. And so it ended up being, a very powerful scenario from
Very
somebody.
much so, because I mean, spend down all of your assets or have assets still down the road for the kids to help
Well,
you with.
it was
huge.
the potential loss of over $1 million to this couple
Yeah.
that we were able to protect, all from a conversation of their kids who are looking for retirement planning themselves. And so it just, it's funny sometimes how those things evolve as we walk through the planning process.
Let's talk a little bit more about long-term care. We are living longer than we ever have on this planet today. You can look at actuary tables all around the country. We all know that, all around the world, in fact, but sometimes not always living the best quality of life. Do you talk a lot about long-term care? Do you have clients who you've helped implement solutions there?
Well, long-term care is one of our 5 steps in the retirement blueprint, and it's something that we talk to every client about. Having said that, not every client is worried about, time in a nursing home or losing their assets. And I know that sounds funny, but one of the solutions to long-term care planning is do nothing. If you say, you know what, Tim, it's a coin flip. I may or may not spend time in a nursing home, and if I do, then it is what it is. You have to accept that, and that's probably one of the bigger lessons that I learned in my career early on, was because planning a certain way is important to me doesn't necessarily mean it's important to the client. But for the most part, I think a lot of folks, as they look at their nest egg and all the work that went into saving, they see the value in looking at some of the multiple planning options there is to protect those assets.
With all the retirement planning you do, I've got to ask, do you know your way around some of these long-term care facilities? Do you know how to help people with choices? I've even heard of communities where essentially you kind of liquidate all of your own assets and you move in, and they have everything from recreation to meals, and then eventually, longer care. Have you looked at a lot of these? Do you know how to help people assess what might be best for their situation? I really don't know where to get started, because if I do my, once again, research on the internet, it starts to get overwhelming.
We just had a case 3 weeks ago, a lady that was actually looking at moving to Pennsylvania. And she was looking at moving to Pennsylvania and had just done that. She was asking the question, hey, should I just rent? And if I end up having to go in a nursing home, I just do that, or should I do one of these buy-in options? And they're all different, and you can certainly do your research, but typically you're paying an upfront cost, kind of buying in like you would buy a house, and that money stays with the community, and your level of care, no matter what that level of care becomes, you're guaranteed to be taken care of. And so that's a very popular choice if the money works out, because there's still typically monthly cost, and there's still cost of living. So we have to basically look at the income, and is the money there to be able to do whatever that community requires.
Right. So there's so many different kinds of options. Looking at traditional long-term care policies, go back to that other word, annuity. There are annuities that have long-term care riders. There's self-funding. There's communities. But people don't know what they're going to need. How do you help them figure out that solution? Does it come down to how much they have saved so they can decide the way that they get to retire? Or can we have some choice in this if we do it early?
Well, if you do it early, you have choices. If you don't, a lot of times the decision is made for you based on your assets. And so, sometimes we can self-fund, and sometimes we don't have the money to do that, and we get put in a position of needing to do it through estate planning.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to wrap up today's program. I'd like to let you tell the folks about the Retirement Blueprint, what it means to you, what they're going to get when they call the phone number here.
Well, for those at home that are watching right now, if some of the things that we've just talked about, things like, a stay in a nursing home, taking care of a spouse, second marriage, taking care of the kids when we're gone, and what that might look like. If you're serious about getting things in writing, putting a plan together that is designed specifically for you, for your family, to make sure that you live your best retirement, this is your opportunity. We are offering a free complimentary review where we will help create a retirement blueprint just for you.
Tim, thank you so much for today's program. Folks, call 855-684-3485. Thank you for watching the Retirement Blueprint with Tim Lofton. He'll be back again next week.